You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic from the Cinematropolis.com. And today we're going to be looking at Season 1, Episode 25 of Batman the Animated Series, Clock King. And Joshua, I don't think we've got enough time in this episode for the obnoxious amounts of puns that are going to get thrown out there. TikTok.
I don't think they're obnoxious. I'm just saying, I really like them. I think that the obnoxious thing is that we overuse one of them.
Yeah, that's probably it. Actually, I don't think they're really that obnoxious. I just think there's a lot of very on-the-nose time puns here.
It's true, but we've talked about this a little bit with some of other Batman's villains, that the shtick is the thing that makes them sticky, right? Sure, now Joker is this crazy murderer, but I don't think we'd still be talking about him if he hadn't gone through his deadly practical jokes phase. We super don't care about the Penguin, except for the umbrellas and bird shtick, right?
Right.
And so in the case of the Clock King, it's baked into the character, and the pun stuff shows us that that is his note. It's his one note, and he plays it perfect. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with that. He has one shtick that's baked in from the very get-go, and it runs throughout the entire show. I actually like this episode quite a bit. I like Clock King. It's very procedural, but it's effective. Very effective procedural use of a villain and a shtick that I think is great. Tells us a lot more about the city politics. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot to hit on here. The city politics. We bring back in Mayor Hill, Hamilton Hill again. Yeah, no, I think this is a great one-off. He's not quite a one-off character. He's a procedural character that's so good they decided to bring him back again later.
That's right. Honestly, I added this episode to our list for this podcast because I know eventually we are going to talk about Justice League, and his appearance in Justice League is so perfect an example of going back to a well for an existing character to fill a slot in a script.
Right.
They could have put almost anybody as the guy in the chair in that episode, but instead they bring back the Clock King, and it makes so much sense.
Right.
Now, on top of that, I think that this is an amazingly well put together episode.
Yes.
Like, again, we're going to go to the well right now. I think it's a Swiss watch of an episode.
It really is.
The thing moves methodically, but never boring.
No, well, actually, I think that's one thing that works about it. Talking about style, I was trying to figure out, because I was like, man, this is procedural, but what works about it is it does play like a thriller in the sense that there's that constant sense of urgency. Not like it never feels rushed, but you're always like,
I am on the edge of my seat.
What's going on, man? And it does a really great job at capturing you and hooking you. They start with the flashback opening where we get to see how he got created. And man, what a tragic story. This man, firstly, he's very tightly wound, which is already kind of sad, but he gets his job done.
Also a time pun.
Oh, tightly wound. Oh, man. God, I didn't even catch that one.
I know. Hamilton Hill does that one to him. And doesn't pause as though it's a joke. Like, I kind of wonder if they wrote it and didn't realize that they had done it.
I don't know, because I that one went right over my head too. Wow, that's great. So much puns. And basically, he's like, you know what? I am really stressed out. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to go have my coffee outside about 15 minutes later than I would do. Those gosh darn hooligans in the park just happen to throw a ball that knocks his very valuable papers over, and then they get thrown into the fountain, and it ruins everything. And then he's late to his court date. And then he loses $20 million. Probably I'm certain he lost his career. He said
specifically, that's the end of my company. That's the end of everything. He said that to Hamilton Hill. So yeah, when he loses that court case, his life is over.
Right.
Yeah. I want to talk about that courtroom scene.
Oh, please do.
Because it ties back to some of my thoughts about the title card, actually.
Oh, yes. Oh, can't forget the title card.
No, I mean, there's lots to talk about here. But
this is a standout title card. I love this one, actually.
It is so good. So it's just clocks, really. But they're kind of ghostly clocks, and they're like different depths in the field of vision, and you can kind of see some of them through other ones. Like, it's just a weird perspective on them, and they're kind of ghostly. Like, it's a pale background, and they're kind of smoky and weird. Mm-hmm. And what it reminded me of specifically was like a combination of Dolly's Persistence of Memory and a Twilight Zone title card.
Yeah, definitely. I'm feeling that Twilight Zone vibes off of that one for sure.
I'll talk about the music right quick and then tell you why the courtroom scene makes me think that the Twilight Zone connection is on purpose.
Okay.
So the music there is very darkly whimsical, I would say.
Yes.
And full of ambient clock noises. There's a lot of tick-tocks. There's some bells. Clocks are a part of the music. They're not all of the music, but they factor in.
Right.
And honestly, ambient clock noises is going to be a thing that keeps on going through this episode,
Right.
and not out of nowhere. You have people checking their watch, and you have time bombs and all kinds of reasons for there to be clock noises. But it starts right here in the title card as complementing the music. Now, the courtroom scene was so surreal, right?
Yes.
It's this like
Big
incredibly
black room.
long black room. Only the benches are there to give some depth perception, and then the judge is way at the far end, and then the judge just looms over him. This reminded me very much of a variety of Twilight Zone episodes. Like, there's not one that's in my mind, although there probably was one with a judge. I just can't call it to mind. But this shooting of the thing with this crazy lens so that the room that's already a long room looks impossibly long, and that is all part of showing the mental state of the person who's coming into the room.
Right.
And then there's an authority figure just looming over you, ruining your life. I don't think that Rod Serling's touch on the title card is an accident, considering it doesn't really come up. We don't get more Twilight Zone stuff through the show.
Right.
But between those two things, just, I get it.
Feels like a big influence, for sure.
I get it. You are ruining this man's life with something, in this case, literally larger than life.
Right.
It's so good.
Right. No, it's interesting too. I'm really glad you point that out. I really liked the title card a lot. It just kind of set the tone really well for exactly what you're about to get yourself into. And I think it's interesting. One thing that a theme that we've been talking about, especially in the first season where we're covering all these origins, is that Batman always gets the blame for creating all the villains, but really a lot of these villains, if you look at it, are actually created by Bruce Wayne. Some of it's Batman, but also some of it's competitors who are trying to get at Batman or get it or get at Bruce Wayne. And this one is just pure misfortune and bad luck.
All happenstance. I actually believe Hill when he's insisting that it was sincere advice.
Oh, I do too. I think he was trying to be a nice guy.
He probably shouldn't have, ethically, if he works for the firm that is representing that. Honestly, he should have gone and sat on a different train.
Yeah. So here's the thing. It's interesting because I don't think he even. That was actually a nice little twist at the end of the episode. It was like, because that's not
it's possible he doesn't even know.
It's explicit. It's not explicit at the beginning. That's what's going on. Like I don't think the audience knows that until the Clock King drops it at the end of the episode. And you're like, oh, this adds a whole nother layer of complexity to your vengeance against Hill because it was his firm that was defending.
You're convinced he did it to you on purpose,
right?
Which is Byzantine craziness, but to a guy who schedules his day to the minute.
But he's so methodical. His everything is so logically and well constructed. So I can only imagine a guy like that. It's kind of like a Moriarty figure. Everything is fit into this weird reality in his head. And this
is Clock King's pathology, right? Like everything happens on a schedule. And so if that's how he lives, that must be how everybody lives.
Right. And because Hamilton happened to wait until just that day to give him that advice, then obviously it was part of the master scheme to undermine him.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll give you that. Hamilton Hill probably didn't even know that his firm was on the other side. Okay, fine. It's just I live with a lawyer and I recognize there's an ethical issue there.
Yeah, yes. Legitimately.
Legitimate ethical issue. But I actually like that better. I like it better the way that you're reading it, where Hill honestly does not even know until
that moment
Clock King says it,
and then it's like, oh shit. Well, I just was trying to give you some good advice. I mean, it was unsolicited advice,
right?
But it was still like, oh man, you seem wound up. I hope maybe just change your schedule up a little bit,
Yeah,
but he tells it
advice that is also terrible.
Yeah, so. Well, yeah, exactly. Hey,
not just because of how it works out.
Well, because breaking your routine on a really important day is not a great idea.
Don't do it.
Yeah,
even I barely have a routine. And I know better than to break my routine
on a very important day. You don't screw with the routine. Yeah. So another aspect of the style here was there was a very CSI detective Batman aspect here. Like actually CSI. Like I was like, there was some Blade Runner shenanigans going on when he was like doing the little square focus on the photo. To get the serial number on the watch. I was like, it did the weird clipping thing where the camera would zoom in and
the inexplicable in terms of Blade Runner clicking. But here we can go, well, it was 1992.
Yeah, no. It makes way more sense here. But I was still like the style. I was like, it's the same technology they borrowed
to get a serial number. That's not for nothing.
Right.
Little like trivia tidbit that I don't know. If you know, maybe you do. This is a thing I know from reading detective novels for years and years. Where they get that idea, that is actually a Rolex thing. Like if you purchase a Rolex, they are so expensive. I mean, especially the highest of high-end Rolexes, they are individualized with serial numbers. So if they're stolen, you can find them. That whole idea of the $6,000 Metronex being a clock that the Clock King would use because it's so precise.
Right.
I was like, oh, that's actually grounded in some reality.
Right.
That's pretty great.
I actually saw it as a different way. I do appreciate that you mentioned that, though, but for me, that was also kind of like I mentioned with Clayface. It was also like the villain's like wink to say, I'm the one who did it. Even if no one else, you know what I mean? It's like, how, like like the people who are in those states, like especially very obsessive about details, sometimes they'll like slip one in just to put a personal touch on it.
That's fair. And Clock King definitely, by the end of it, wants everybody to know he's the one that did it.
Right.
And so leaving that minute a clue at the beginning, cool stuff.
Right.
So yeah, I'm fine with that being part of his pathology. I just thought it was also really cool that we're going to ground this
based on
CSI clue
actual
in real life stuff. It's pretty cool.
And we got to see Alfred being pretty hands-on. That was a lot of fun.
I love all the crime fighting from the back seat that's going on.
Oh, yes.
And we get Dry Alfred with Finest Back Alley and all that good stuff. Yeah. It was nice to see them working together as closer partners in a way that it would normally be Batman and Robin, just because it happened to be daytime.
Right.
He got stuck out.
Right.
All right. We'll do it this way.
So, I mean, yeah, a lot of good things here, character-wise. Alfred, Hamilton Hill, and then, of course, the Clock King. You're the comic books guru, Joshua. Tell me a little bit more about the Clock King, though, because this is my first and very limited interactions with this character is all in Batman and Justice League. Oh, and some Suicide Squad I've read at some point.
This is one of the rare instances when I got actually'd and the person that did it was right.
What?
This is not because I'm so clever. It's just I've spent my whole life filling my head with this nonsense. So usually I know what I'm talking about. The Clock King did appear in Batman 66. That was my first brush with him, is in Batman 66, which is pretty far back, right? They did a version of him for the CW's Arrow. And I was talking on Twitter about how Arrow poaches all of Batman's B and C list villains, which it does, which is fine, because Batman's not using them.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, he's not using them, and Green Arrow has, by and large, pretty crap villains. It makes sense. They were basically doing low-rent Batman on that show anyway. I'm fine with it. The one hardcore Green Arrow fan that I have ever met in my life came back and was like, actually, the Clock King is originally a Green Arrow villain. I went and looked it up. He did originally, 1960, in an issue of World's Finest, start as a Green Arrow villain. So for one time, Batman poached one of Green Arrow's C-list
That's
villains.
right. But then he poached him, but then made him arguably made him a lot better.
No, he definitely made him a lot better. Batman 66, Clock King is just okay, right? Like he does the job that he's there to do. He only appears a couple of times. He's mostly there for the twist ending where he's also the Mad Hatter's brother.
Oh my God.
I mean, again, you're dealing with Batman 66. The bar is sort of different. But this, much like Mr. Freeze, much like Two-Face, you get a much more fleshed out backstory for him here, right? We can sympathize with one day kind of ruining
No,
your
I
life.
totally sympathize with the Clock King.
Right?
I do. Like things went wrong and it screwed his whole life up, and because I totally understand the obsessive personality and everything has to fit together a certain way for life to function. And so whenever your whole life's pulled up from under you, I totally sympathize. He like rebuilds his life essentially as a villain. And it's again hell-bent on vengeance.
And we haven't seen Hill be a very effective mayor.
Right.
Honestly, every time he shows up, he's kind of a joke.
At best.
Sometimes
he's a jerk.
Sometimes he's just a jerk. But I mean, we never see him really being great as a mayor. And so I can even sympathize with the Clock Kings. Well, I'm just going to make sure he doesn't get reelected.
Right.
If it had stopped there, if it had just been ruining things to make Hill look even worse, I'd be like, oh, okay. I mean, you're still doing the villainy and the crimes, but okay.
Right.
Now we'll murder him at the end. Okay, now you've gone too far.
Yeah. Well, it went just a little further. Yeah. Yeah.
So originally, Green Arrow villain, but he gets borrowed by Batman 66 and still is kind of junk. But then BTAS nails it and makes this a person that is really interesting. And I think the fact that he is so one note is why we don't see him again.
Well, he does return one other time in Batman the Animated Series, an episode called Time Out of Joint, one I don't think I've seen, or at least can't recall.
I know I've seen all of these, and we did some quick off-mic Googling, and I do remember this one now, but he gets a superpower, and it's kind of off-book for the guy.
Right.
I think there's a reason the only two I remembered before I had to do a deep dive was the Origin and Task Force X
and Justice League Unlimited. Yeah. So I would say yes, his next most prominent appearance is going to be in Task Force X. And I think it works. This is a self-contained story. It rolls. It's great. We get who this guy is, and then he comes back later as part of an ensemble.
Yeah,
Flawless.
where his one note fits with the other guy's pretty much one notes.
Right, exactly.
And together they make a little symphony. But I'm not surprised we don't see him 100 times. It's not quite as adaptable.
Well, there's only so far you can go with that. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's only so much you can explore in that character and that archetype.
Also, they used all the puns.
Yeah, they ran out of time puns.
For anybody who's wondering, the one that I think they overuse is, it's about time, which I think he uses seriously 3 or 4 times, including in the very first scene that we see him.
And Time's Up. We hear that one a few times too.
Yeah, I'm kind of okay with that one. And the only reason I complain about that is because at the very end, when he is escaping certain doom, he doesn't use a clock pun.
Right. Because he's got to come back for his sequel episode to use more clock puns.
Well, sure. It just is a missed opportunity to say, there's always time for another round, Batman. Something.
Right.
Throw me a bone. You've beat that drum to death, and then in your final scene, you're not going to get one. What is actually happening?
Now, one other thing I want to hit on before we wrap the talk, in past episodes, we look at the cracked mirror aspect of, hey, how is this guy someone different? Well, I think with this one in particular, he's obviously very intellectual.
Yes.
And can actually outthink Batman. The thing about Batman is Batman has a heart and is a little more moved, has more emotion, weirdly. That sounds strange, but Clock King is so calculating.
Mm-hmm.
So he's intellectual, but I would say the thing that he doesn't have necessarily in common is Batman is a calculating guy. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I would say he has...
He's world's greatest detective.
Right.
We are literally tabulating facts.
Right. But I would say that Clock King's big difference is that it's so cold calculations. Everything is just so meticulous. He doesn't care about the human life involved. He doesn't really, it's all about fulfilling his agenda specifically. So I think that would be kind of, that was the only major difference I could come up with there.
No, I agree with that completely, especially in terms of Mayor Hill, who we know hates Batman. Right. And Bruce Wayne apparently thinks Mayor Hill is otherwise a good guy because he's supporting his reelection for whatever that's worth. But at the same time, if you want to do a callback to one of our previous episodes, when Batman saves Mayor Hill's son and then sends him home without making a big deal out of it because he knows that his insertion into that situation will kind of ruin their moment. But it's more that compassion. A compassion takes you out of the picture. Clock King's lack of compassion puts him very fully in the picture.
Right.
In a way that's going to wind up with you dead.
Right.
So, yeah. The other thing is a little bit on a physical side.
Okay.
We were talking a little bit off mic, so I'll bring it in here because I think it's a really interesting thing that they don't play up a whole lot, but I think could have made Clock King a more continued threat. He is so hyper aware of time that Batman can't lay a glove on him.
Right.
Clock King has studied Batman, knows how long the punches take, how long the kicks take, and I don't think Clock King's ever going to lay a glove on Batman,
right.
But it's going to go the other way too. He's always not going to be there anymore.
Right.
We do see a little of that when he's using the clock gears against Batman and being very effective with it.
Right.
But I could just see that level of time awareness being developed into almost a superpower.
Right.
Where if you did go off and learn a little bit of mystical kung fu, you'd be pretty amazing.
Yeah, right.
Like you could reinvent the Clock King into a different guy.
Because physically he's not really much of a threat, but like his ability to sense how long it takes Batman to throw a punch it really makes him deadly.
Physically he's not a threat. Batman is also physically not a threat to him.
Right.
Which is a thing you have to deal with a lot when you have intellectual villains is, but now Batman's close to him. Why doesn't he just punch him really hard?
Right.
It's even a question with the Joker sometimes, honestly. Like, these guys should not be able to hang. I just really liked that they put that in there to make him somewhat of a physical threat. Because I think sometimes, and we didn't even really dive into this because there's such a hot mess in the first part of Clayface, but Batman is made to be much less effective than he ought to be so that the thugs can get a few shots in.
Right.
I appreciate this approach better.
Right. Where there's actually an explanation for
escalate your threat instead of de-escalate your protagonist.
Your protagonist, yeah, absolutely. Joshua, so I think we're both on the same page. It sounds like this is a must-watch. I mean, it seems like a random one to throw in, but I really think this is a highly recommended episode from the first season.
I agree. It's so well put together. I mean, again, I'm going to avoid the watch pun, but it just is really well put together. It moves forward. Every scene matters. The reasons that Clock King is doing the things he's doing make sense to us through his lens. It brings in the city politics, which is it is shockingly good considering I'm not sure anybody else would put it on one of their top 10 lists. I might.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely like as far as especially like top 10 air quotes procedural ones, like it's just like the villain of the week type of things. I think this is a great one.
It's a good mystery. I'm on the record as loving Batman as detective, so doing that stuff. One of the things that is on the label as a Batman the Animated Series goal is like big set pieces, In fact, there's an episode we're not going to do called Prophecy of Doom because the episode's not very good, but I almost wanted to because the set piece is so good. You get one of those in this really good procedural episode.
Right.
Because the clock is amazing.
Oh, yeah, it's huge.
It's huge, and it does different things. And the gears,
visually, it's striking. It matches the themes and the villain.
Yeah. I mean, it's on point for his shtick, and it's a dangerous environment for Batman that is not dangerous for his opponent. Like, he's chosen the right battleground. And it's also kind of classic. Like, we've had a lot of final battles at clock towers or on the outside, hanging from the clock face and stuff like that. It's great. It's classic and an update.
It's so good. Yeah, recommend. And then of course you've got to watch Task Force X. I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point.
Oh, definitely. It's just going to take us a minute. There's a lot of Batman and Superman and Justice League in between here and there.
Because it's like later in the Justice League run. Yep. So, all right. Well, Josh, before we wrap up, any other recommendations? Books, movies, comic books, TV shows that you'd recommend to go along with Clock King?
Okay, this is kind of random, but it's a superhero show, so I'm going to go with it. I'm not even necessarily going to suggest a particular story, but I am going to suggest that you check out a particular superhero. Hourman.
Hourman.
Yes. He has appeared on, I think, Legends of Tomorrow. He's appeared on Smallville, I think.
Interesting.
He's part of the Justice Society of America originally, and that's probably the best place to get it. There were some late 90s, early 2000s JSA books with David S. Goyer was actually writing them and then co-writing them with Jeff Johns.
Interesting.
Pretty good stuff. I think it's before Goyer lost his joy.
Yeah,
right. And also, it's before Jeff Johns lost his joy, too. But anyway, an Hourman. So his deal is he takes a pill that makes him super strong and invulnerable for 1 hour. And he can only take one a day. When I say go back to the Golden Age comics, I don't mean it's because they're great, but it's a fun gimmick to watch them have to deal with in these 10, 11, 12-page stories. Right. It's fun. It's fun. And it makes time a very specific part of the narrative without going into some weird time travel shenanigans or something.
So it's time to go back to the past.
Oh my God,
guys! I mean, all the clock puns. You gotta watch all the clock movies and time pun movies. You gotta watch Clock Stoppers. You gotta watch In Time. You gotta watch Out of Time. You gotta watch Time Crimes. Actually, Time Crimes is really good. No,
Time Cop. You gotta watch Time Cop. Jean-Claude Van Damme.
There you go. Actually, you don't have to watch that one. But
I agree.
No, I have a real recommendation, and it's weird, but just I was thinking of a good suspense thriller that's also kind of action oriented. That's the same sense of urgency, and I've got two. Firstly, 2017 great film from Christopher Nolan. So if you're a Nolan fan, if you haven't seen it yet, Dunkirk. Also, it makes a very time is a very important factor in that. It's a very interesting plot structure involving the use of time because there's 3 different groups of people traveling at different speeds. Anyway, but the movie utilizes a clock ticking throughout the entire score. There's always a clock ticking. People are checking time because they're running out of time.
We saw in this episode how strong that can be. So that's awesome.
It's powerful. So both thematically, the idea of a race against time, I think is really effective, and it's also incorporated into the score in that film. And also just for fun, Speed, starring Keanu Reeves.
Oh no, that's good.
I think
that's a really good variation on the time bomb, right? I mean, it's basically the same kind of concept. You're going to run out of road. You're going to run out of time. But no, that's a rock solid recommendation. I'm annoyed that I didn't think of it.
It's a fun movie too.
It's also really fun. Yeah. Well, that about wraps up this animated discussion, Caleb. Where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, Joshua, as always, people can find me on the interweb. I am the editor-in-chief of a website dedicated to film analysis and film essays called thecinematropolis.com, where if you really enjoy the deep dives we're taking into each episode of Batman the Animated Series, we do the same thing for films across the spectrum, all sorts of genres. And even, Joshua, you've written some great essays for us there. We've got some stuff on Captain America. We've got some stuff on Smokey and the Bandit. We might have some stuff on Batman the Animated Series even, or a
teaser.
Film. Yeah, so again, that's thecinematropolis.com, or you can find me personally on Twitter being very overactive, tweeting about things such as film, TV, comic books, video games, all that good stuff at C Masters Talk. Again, that's at letter C Masters Talk. Joshua, how about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter. That's where you can find me easily enough at Joshua Unruh. I will field any superhero question you have for me there.
Literally any of them.
Seriously. And dangerously, it might also turn into yet another podcast. So hit me up there with any superhero stuff you've got going on. I'll also keep you in the loop on any fiction, articles, other podcasts, or just general diatribes that I cast out into the world, including my work at the Cinematropolis and at Pulp Diction Productions and Press.
All right, everyone. Well, we're so glad you made the time to join us today. So I think it's about time that I let you know on our next episode, we'll be talking about the Season 1 episode from Batman the Animated Series, Appointment in Crime Alley. Don't be late for a very important date.
Until next time, we'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Animated Discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. And if you can't support us financially, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. It's the best way to help others discover the show. Keep up with Pulp Diction news by following @Joshua Unruh on Twitter, or find us at facebook.com/pulpdictionproductions. And a special thanks to Vinnie Hogan for our original theme music.